Hello friends, welcome back to my channel, and today we are back with another exciting tutorial on DevOps. So as you can see on the screen, this will be an exciting tutorial where we'll be using Jenkins, Docker and Kubernetes. And we are going to see a complete step-by-step process how you can integrate Jenkins, Kubernetes for our continuous integration and deployment of our application. So we'll see how our application can be deployed to a Kubernetes cluster using our cicd pipeline. So we'll see the complete process of that so that we can have our application in our GitHub and it will be pushed to our Kubernetes cluster, and our application deployment and services will be running on the cluster, and we should be able to access our application from internet. So before I get into the actual process, let me just give you a quick highlight on what we are going to do in this tutorial. Let's talk about the whole CI/CD pipeline for our Kubernetes deployment using Jenkins. So let me show you the pictorial representation first, then we will talk about each steps what we are going to do. So first, let's consider you're a developer or you are the owner of your application. You're using GitHub or GitLab or any other repository where you'll be saving your code. So you're going to commit your code to your Git repository. Okay, and in our case we are going to use nodejs application. So if you have a different application, you can use that as well. The concept is same, but you'll have to make some modification on the pipeline script. So we have a Jenkins which will act as our automation or integration tool. So what we will do is Jenkins will use the code from GitHub where we'll be saving our whole Jenkins pipeline file, or even your deployment files, service files and everything will be saved under GitHub, your Docker file. I'll show you all those things. So so let me show you how this workflow happens. So once you have your code, one of the stage what we will define in the Jenkins would be like you can test your application. So first you will test your nodejs application whether the application is fine using your npm tests or whatever the defined way in your application. So I will show you in my case, the application I have defined like a testers.js file which will give the output. Okay, and the next step would be like once you have your application completely fine, then you will do the Docker build. So we will build your application as a Docker image, and this has to be done on a machine where you have Docker installed. So you can use any Jenkins slave where the Docker is installed. Okay, so once the Docker image is built, so you have our Docker image available for application, then we will push the application into a repository which is our Docker repository, which is the Docker Hub. So the application image will be available in the Docker Hub. So once the Docker Hub, then we can deploy our application. So for our deployment, we are going to use a Kubernetes cluster which have multiple nodes. So in Kubernetes cluster, we will pull the image from Docker Hub and we will create our deployment and services in the Kubernetes cluster. So our application will be running on the nodes, so then we should be able to access from internet. So all this process will be done using a Jenkins pipeline file. So where we'll be writing our whole code in different stages. So our application will be deployed by Kubernetes by just one click. Okay. So let's see what are the steps which we are going to do in the whole process. So in the whole integration with Kubernetes with Jenkins, what we will do is first we will create a Jenkins instance as a Docker container. So if you already have it, no issues. So since some of you may not be aware how you can easily create a Jenkins, I'm going to use a Docker container for Jenkins. And in order to create a Docker builds, we need to have a slave machine where you have a Docker install. So we will see how we can make the same machine on which you are running the Jenkins as a container. We will make some configuration on when we create in the Jenkins instance itself. So it will, you can run the commands on the Jenkins master itself. You don't have to create a separate slave. Okay. So another steps would be like you have to install Docker pipeline plugin, because our Jenkins YAML file we'll be using some specific characters or attributes which will work only if you have a Docker pipeline plugin. And we will also install Kubernetes continuous plugin. There are different ways you can integrate Jenkins and Kubernetes. In our case, we are going to use Kubernetes continuous plugin, and we'll show you how to do that. And also, in order to configure this Kubernetes plugin, we need some configuration from our Kubernetes master. So we'll be using a config file, kube-config file from our Kubernetes master. So I will tell you from where you can get that, because there is no clear picture on how to do all these things in any other tutorials. So that's why I'm creating this tutorial, which I'm sure definitely will help you. So, and then once we have all this configuration set up, we will write our Jenkins pipeline file, and the Jenkins pipeline file will do the Docker build, so that the image is created. Then it will push the image to Docker registry, which is the Docker hub. So then the next stage would be like pulling the image from Docker registry and deploying to your Kubernetes cluster. So in order to do all this process, some of things which we have not discussed, because we are not going to create a Kubernetes cluster or anything. So you need to have some prerequisites to do all these steps. So the first step is like you need to have an application to be deployed in Kubernetes. So in our case, we are going to use a nodejs application. So you should have a nodejs or any other application which is suitable for our pipeline, or you'll have to edit your pipeline. So you should have your application in GitHub. So if you don't have it, please check my previous tutorials where you can use those GitHub link, or you can use the GitHub link I'm linking into this video description. Then you should know how to write a Docker file. So these all things are covered in previous tutorial. So we'll also make use of a Docker file where it will tell you how to build, or you can how to build your image. So how to build your nodejs application, there's a structure how you can write the Docker file. And you also need to have a Kubernetes cluster. So if you don't know how to set up a Kubernetes cluster, again I will tell you, check on my tutorials. I have a clear tutorial how you can set up a Kubernetes cluster on virtual machine itself. You don't have to even use cloud. Then you need to have a Kubernetes deployment and service manifest file or YAML file, because we have to use those files to deploy our application into the Kubernetes cluster. So all these things I have covered in my previous tutorial. So you can also check my GitHub link where you'll be getting all these details. Okay. So before I get to the actual demo process, I would request you, like, if you are new to my channel, or if you have not subscribed to my channel, click on the subscribe button, and also like my video, share and comment. Okay, so let's get started with our actual steps. So we'll be using one of this machine which is having Docker installed. So in this machine, I'm going to create an instance for Jenkins so that we can use that instance for our Jenkins pipeline script. So the simple command is like, you can run docker run and detach mode, and you can map the ports, and you can name the container, and you can run it. So this will create a Jenkins instance without any volumes and all those things. But the problem here it is you cannot use the same machine which you have this Jenkins instance running for running our Docker build, because this instance is running on this machine, and it's that container will act as a Jenkins master, right? So when you run a pipeline script to look for a slave or machine which have Docker available to run some of the commands which you use the images or Docker commands. So in this case, so I'm just going to edit this whole script to make it easy, so that we can use the same machine as the Jenkins master, or when we run some commands or pipeline script which will use the same machine to run the Docker commands. So for that, I'll be running this command where you can see I'm using docker run, and I'm defining the user, and it should be running on the privileged mode. Okay, so then only we can make use of this whole process which I told, and I'm going to give a name for this container, and it's in the detached mode, and it's also the map the port 5000 50,000 and port 880. And this is also important because we are going to map the Docker from local things to the container. Okay, so that Docker socks should be mapped, and the user bin directory, and I'm also mapping the home as a volume, so that we can have our whole contents in this volume. So if you run this, you can see our Docker container is created. Okay, so now if I run docker ps, the container is run. So let me use docker logs -f and this container id. So it's we will get the logs now. So it's starting the process because it's still the container is not completed, so that Jenkins instance is not up. So why we are running this? Because we need to wait for this to be completed. So you can see there is an ID which is created, which is the initial login password. Okay, so you can see this is found. This is the initial login password which we need to use at the time of login to the Jenkins instance. So if you access the IP address of your machine and port 8080, you can see now Jenkins is starting up. So we need to wait for it to be loaded. So it will complete the process, and now we can see it's asking to the initial admin password. So that's to unlock the Jenkins instance, you need to write that. So for that, you just copy this initial password from that screen, and you can paste it here. You can click on continue. So that's the reason I run the docker log -f. Okay, and you can click on install plugin. So you can exit from the screen. So we need to wait for the installations to be completed. This may take some time for the whole plugins to be installed. So I'll skip this screen. So the plugins installation is completed. Then it will ask you to create your first admin account. So you can give a name and you can set a password for it and confirm the password and give a full name and also the email address. So once you click on save and continue, it will give you the URL to access your Jenkins, which we are already here, and save and finish. So once you click on start using Jenkins, our Jenkins is up. So we are inside the Jenkins now, and we need to do the next steps. So the next step is like we need to create, or you need to install our plugin. So you need to go to manage Jenkins, and if you go to manage plugins, you have the plugins in the update and also available and install. You need to go to available, and you need to search for Docker pipeline. So you need to install this plugin because it is used in our Jenkins pipeline file. So some of the commands will not work if you don't have the pipeline. So you can just select and install without restart. So we need to wait for the plugin to be installed. So you can see the plugin installation is completed. So you can go back, and we need to go back to the manage plugin again, and we need to search for Kubernetes continuous deploy plugin. Now the problem here is if you search here, you can see the version is 2.3.1. So the installation will work fine, but unfortunately our pipeline will fail, because what I see is as per the plugin GitHub or the Jenkins page itself, it has mentioned like the plugin version is getting failed. So what you need to do is you need to go to advanced, okay, and you need to select upload plugin. So you need to select choose. I have already downloaded a plugin which is this version. I will give you the link for this. It's version 1.0. So it's the Kubernetes same plugin, but is a lower version. So I will link that into this video description. So you can go there and you can download the plugin directly from that link, and you can select and you can upload it. So you just wait for that to be completed. Right, so the plugin installation is completed. So now just go back. Now if you check your plugins in the available, you should be able to see the Kubernetes plugin. Not on the available, on the install, you should be able to see the Kubernetes plugin now. So you can see now the Kubernetes deploy plugin is there, but the version is 1.0, right? And you should also have the Docker pipeline plugin. Yeah, you can see the Docker pipeline plugin as well. So what we are doing is we are doing one of the way to do this whole process. Okay, So now let me go back to the application first. Okay, so this is the application which we are going to use, which is a node application. And you have our index.js where we get, when we go to the home page, it will tell you like hello from response colon or hello from tips for you. And also if you go to slash will, it will tell you this slash ready, and it's running on the port 3000. And you also see like you have a Docker file, and that Docker file is using this process so that when you run Docker build command, it will build your application. And you also have a test folder where you can have a test.js. So we are not going to use that testing for this whole process, so we'll skip that. But you can add that based on your application if you want to add some stage for testing. And we have a deployment and service file, but I have combined both into a single file called deployment service.yaml. So once you run it, it will create the deployment and as well as the service. So we already discussed about how to create your deployment and service and all those things in the previous tutorial, so I'm not going to run all those things in this section. Now if you see, like, we have defined the image here as my Docker Hub user ID and the app name and also the latest tag. So we'll be also pushing our image in this details, because otherwise this image is not available, then we should be not able to run this deployment and the service. So when we create our Jenkins pipeline, we'll be defining what the image name which has to be pushed to the Docker Hub. So we should make use of the same image name what we are defining here. Okay, and you can also see like the service we are using type load balancer, and the port, the node port which we are mapping is 3110, which is mapped to the port 3000 of your application. So that's the overall thing what we are going to use. Now let me talk about the pipeline file. So this is the pipeline file which we are going to write it in the GitHub Jenkins pipeline section. Okay, so there are two ways you can create this as a Jenkins file on the Docker or GitHub itself, the file location where your application is there, or you can manually write it into your Jenkins pipeline section. So for easier purpose, we just copy and paste it into the pipeline section in this tutorial. Okay, so what we are going to do is, as I said, we are going to set up an environment variable as Docker image name. It can be any name you want to give, and this is my Docker Hub login, and this should be the name of the repository which we are going to create. Okay, so starting with Docker image, I'm going to give a blank, and we are setting agents as any, so it can be any slave or any slaves which can run. Okay, so we are not defining any specific slave. Now if you see, the first stage is to check out our GitHub. So you can see like the step is like git here, since I don't use any credentials because it's a public project, I'm using this. So if you don't know how to create all this scheme, you have a Jenkins pipeline syntax editor as well where you can do that. So I will show you that as well, how you can create that. If you go to your Jenkins and if you click on new item, you can select the pipeline and just give a name for your pipeline file or job. You just select the job name as test, and you select the pipeline, and then just click on OK. So our job is ready now. So now what we have options is like you have general options, we have build triggers, advanced option, and the pipeline section, right? So this is the where we are going to write the pipeline script. You also have like pipeline script from SCM, where you can use the Jenkins file creator inside your GitHub repository itself. Now if you see, you have a section called pipeline syntax. So if you click on that, it will take you this place where you can select what kind of script. So you can see I'm using git, and if you put your GitHub repo here, and you can select which branch, and if you have credential, you can save your credential in Jenkins, and if you select that, it will automatically create your generate pipeline. It will automatically create the whole pipeline script which you can copy and paste. Okay, so you can use that to create the pipeline script if you don't know how to create it. So the first stage is like we are going to check out the GitHub. So this is the GitHub link. If your GitHub link has to be edited based on what is your GitHub link. Okay, and the second stage is we are going to build the image. So here you see like we are going to save that into a variable which is called Docker image, and we are going to use the argument docker.build. So in order to work to work docker.build, that is why we need to have the Docker pipeline plugin. okay, and we are going to set the name as docker image. So that's the name coming from here. Now the pushing the image, what we are going to do is we are going to use the registry credential. So what does this means? Like, we have a credential which need to be saved inside your Jenkins. So if you go to Jenkins, and if you go back, if you go to manage Jenkins, go back to your manage credential. Now here, if you go to global, you don't have any credential, so you need to click on credentials, and it should be a username, password, and you need to enter your docker login credentials. So you should give your username. For example, for me, I will give my login for my Docker Hub login, that will be this username, and my password for it. So I can enter that password, then I can give a name. So in my case, I have given the name as Docker Hub login. So this has to be matching, okay, because when we use this one, it has to look for the credential on the Jenkins credential manager. So you need to give that name. So once you give a name, and if you add it, it will be added as a credential. Now when you run this registry credential, it will pull those user login and password from that. So you don't have to manually, or you don't have to hard code your username and password. Okay, now you can see we are using that to log into your Docker Hub. So you can see Docker with registry, and we are using the Docker Hub registry, which is the registry.hub.docker.com, and we are using the credential from here, which is the Docker Hub login. And we are going to push this image, which is the image name, and we are going to give the tag as latest. So there is also a way, like if you don't want to push it directly as latest, you can use some variables here. So you can push it as a first stage, like you push it to as a staging image. Then you can try all those things. Then if you want to add some other stages, you can do some testing with that. And the next stage you can add, like the image from staging should be pushed into as a latest. So that also possible. So you can change the the whole pipeline based on that. And the next stage is, like, once your image is available in Docker Hub, then the next stage is to deploy it your Kubernetes. So now here also we are going to use the variable or argument from Kubernetes deploy, and we are going to set the config. So we are going to use the deployment.service.yaml, which I showed you. I have combined both deployment and service in single file, and I put it into the GitHub, right? And in order to work this, you need to have a kubeconfig ID. So now to create this, again, you need to go to your Docker credential. You need to add a credential, and here you need to select Kubernetes configuration. So this configuration will come only if you have installed your Kubernetes continuous plugin. Okay, if you have not installed it, this option will not come. So once you select it, you need to give a name. So since I'm giving this config ID name as Kubernetes, you should match that over here. Okay, so you need to give that Kubernetes as here as well, so that you use the same name in your there as well. Otherwise, if your pipeline is not matching with this credential manager name, then it will not be able to get this correct running. Now there are different ways you can do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter manually. Now we need to enter the content here. So what content we will run put it here. So let me show you how to do that.
So let's move on to our Kubernetes cluster. So if you don't know how to set up a Kubernetes cluster, I would request you to check on my videos how to set up a Kubernetes cluster. So now if you see, this is my cluster. We have 2 nodes. So you can see I have one master and one worker. So what we can do is, like, for configuring the Kubernetes config file, you need to copy the content from your master node. So for that, you need to go to your home. So if you go to your home, and if you list your files, you have to include the hidden files, and you should be able to see a folder called .cube. So you go to the folder called .cube, and you should be able to see a file called config. So if you read this config file, you should be able to see some information. So see, I'm reading, so you can see like API, cluster, certificate authority, right? So, and the server URLs, so all those things are listed here. So you need to copy this whole content of your config file. So you can just copy this content, and you can go to your Jenkins, and you can enter that content over here. So you can see the whole content you need to copy from that config files, and the config file is located inside .cube from your home. Okay, so that's the location. So you can see this location, so which is under root .cube. So that's the place where you have the config file. So you can read the file from there, and you can put those contents over here. Another option is like you can select from file, and you can map it to there as well. So the easiest way is like you just copy the whole content over here and put it. Okay, so now I have created two credential manager files. So you can see one is for my Docker Hub login, and another one is for Kubernetes config file. Right, so these both are required. So because we need to log into our Docker Hub to push our Docker image, and also we need to log into our Kubernetes cluster to deploy our deployment and services. So now what you can do is you can go to create a new job. Okay, and you can select pipeline, and you can give a name. So I will call it as Kubernetes Jenkins deployment. Okay, and I'll use pipeline and click on OK. So we are going to create the job so that we can push the our application to the Kubernetes cluster. So we'll directly go to the pipeline script, and we are going to enter the pipeline script over here. So we already discussed about the whole pipeline, how it is written. So I'm going to copy the whole pipeline file, and I'm going to paste it to this pipeline script. The other option is you can create a file called Jenkins file inside your Git repository, and you can select the option like a pipeline script from SEM, so it will automatically take this content from the Jenkins file. So again, I just want to show this how the pipeline is written. So you can see the environment variable, we are checking out the Git repository, we are building the image, and we are pushing the image to Docker Hub using the credential like Docker Hub login, which we saved into your Jenkins credential manager, and we are pushing our application to Kubernetes using the kubeconfig ID, which is the Kubernetes credential manager which we deployed, and this is coming the deployment service YAML from the GitHub repository. So just save this. Okay, so before I run the build, let me go to my Kubernetes cluster again, and let me show you like if I go to kubectl get deployments, we don't have any deployments, and we don't have any pods running, right? And we also don't have any services running. So let's this is the default Kubernetes service, so we don't have any service for application. So let's go and run build our job. Okay, so let me run, and you can see like if I click on this one, you should be able to see the whole console output for it. So let's wait how the pipeline script is happening. So we'll be able to see the output. So you can see it started running the Jenkins job. So let's see what is the status we are getting. So the first part is like it's cloning the Git repository, right? So it's checking out, and the next stage is build image, right? So it's going to the build image. So you can see it's running the command docker build -t, and the application name, which image name we have set in the environment variable, and the Docker file is the default locations. So you can see these are done based on our pipeline script, and you can see this is based on the Docker file content. It's creating the Docker image, so it has already created and tagged as Docker app latest. Now it's pushing the image, so you can see it's already logged into your Docker Hub using the password, right? So now it's pushing the image to a Docker Hub. Since I already run it once, so it's already have the image there, so it's otherwise it will take long time to push the image, because this image is almost like 1 gigabyte. So some of the layers are already there, so only the changes will be pushed. So you can see it has already pushed the image. Now it's starting to deploy the Kubernetes to our application, to the Kubernetes as a deployment and also as a service. So it's using this configuration file deployment service.yaml. So let's wait to see what is the status for it. Yeah, good. So we got the success as our pipeline script. So the whole pipeline script has been completed, and we got the success message. So if you go to your job, you can see we have 4 stages. One is for the checkout, other one is for build image, then push image, and deploying to Kubernetes. So all those things are success now. And if I go to my Kubernetes cluster master, and if I run kubectl get deployment, you can see we have our deployment running now. So this is the deployment name which we have defined in our manifest file or YAML file. And if I go to kubectl get pods, we have our pod running for our application as well. And also if you go to kubectl get svc, you can see that our node service is also running. Now we can access our application using this port number. So let's go to our browser. Now if you go to the browser and access our application using the IP address and the port number which we have set in the service, you can see we are getting the home page. And if you put like the routes, so we have a route called will, so you can see that's giving the hello world message. And if you go to ready, it will give you great, it works. So all those things are running, so our application is deployed perfectly fine in our Kubernetes, and also our the deployments, pods and replica sets and everything is running. So if you have a deployment running, you will also have a replica set. Since it's we are running only one replica, we have only one. If we have more than one, we should have seen those replica numbers as well. So just to give a recap, like we have done the whole process from GitHub to the continuous integration with Jenkins, pushing to Docker Hub, then deploying into our Kubernetes cluster. We only did not done this step for testing our application before building our image. That you can add up into your pipeline where you want to test it before building the image, or after building you can test with the build image. Or you can also add other source code checks, like you can add SonarQube, so that you can check your code quality. You can also add like Artifactory to put your binaries. So all those things you can add it to this pipeline. So our concept, what we wanted to do is like how you can integrate your Jenkins with the Kubernetes cluster, so that you can push your application into the Kubernetes cluster. So there are some key things which we discussed, like how to create your credential manager for Docker Hub login, and also how we can use the kubeconfig file for creating the credential manager for Kubernetes integration. And we also shown you like the complete pipeline for your the Kubernetes Jenkins master integration. So you can use that pipeline. I'll be giving you the GitHub link in this video description, so you can refer there, and you can also see how we have written our deployment and service YAML file which we have used to deploy our application. So that is all for this tutorial. I hope it's an informative tutorial for you and you have liked it much. So I would request you to subscribe for more videos, and also like my videos, share and comment.